Hey y'all, I'm excited for you to check out this conversation with Kieran. I just want to share what we got into up front so you know what to expect and hopefully get excited. We talk about his origin story getting started in Roundnet, where he was really on the outside looking in and almost like banging on the doors trying to get into that Premier Division at first, and then his eventual grind and rise to becoming one of the top players today, member of Team USA, and the goals he's continuing to set to push himself and how he thinks about not just Roundnet as a thing that he wants to just play and compete in, but also how he maybe uses it as a tool to push himself to be his best self in and outside of the sport. And we also get into some topics about other priorities he's got in Roundnet, thinking about long-term growth as a player, but also focusing on community as well, and just balancing all those things together. It's a lot to get into, and I hope you guys enjoy. So really excited to catch up today with an old Roundnet friend of mine. It's Kieran Rose. You might know him from the center of some podiums, on the side of a couple, but he's been playing Roundnet for a really long time. He's coming up on at least 6 years of playing competitively. Something I wish we could go into the origins of a little more today is, if you don't know the lore of Kieran Rose, he really loves just competing and playing against the best. I'll leave it at that for now, but really excited to be chatting with you, dude. Coming all the way from Portland, Oregon this week. How are you doing?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on, Ben. I'm really excited to talk. I'm doing great. Just got off of a win with my season partner Pack, and we're trying to take the momentum into the Salt Lake City Major next weekend. So, yeah, going to be excited to kind of do some film review and look ahead to that. But yeah, I'm hanging out with Pack in Portland, Seattle area. Been here for about like a week and a half now, and planned this trip a while ago at the beginning of the year. We wanted to do like a 3 week sort of like training drills, kind of doing everything together. And so it's been a great trip so far. Working remotely, and yeah, it's only 2 o'clock here too, so I still have the rest of the day, which is great.
Yeah, probably some time to do some more training or something like that. You touched on almost every single thing that I think I want to cover today. So I'll just start with the beginning. Just like your origin. Just talk briefly. I know you've bounced around a couple of places geographically. What was your origin story for just getting into your first Roundnet tournament?
Yeah, origin story. I was living in Santa Cruz, California at the time. It's back in high school for me, so it was like 2017-ish, and bounced spike ball through just playing, or I guess I was boogie boarding on the beach, and my friends and I kind of ran into people that were playing, and happened to be that the people that we met were premier players at the time in Santa Cruz. And so we kind of got into the scene through them, and like I remember they were two lefties, Ryan Narvali and Will, forgetting the last name of the other guy, but I think Will Potter maybe. But
that sounds right. Yeah,
yeah,
Navaroli. Yeah, just
yep,
if you
yep.
know what a Santa Cruz Roundnet is, that means that you started playing Roundnet after 2020.
Yeah, and so just got into the sport then. They were hitting some crazy serves, and I was like, this looks really fun. I was never receiving them, and kind of started to see like the peak of like how I kind of wanted to play as a player. Not that I have hopefully become more than a serve baller at this point, but do sort of think that initial aspect of serving was something that really grew my passion for the sport. And from there, I guess we continued to play in high school. When I moved to New York, that's where I really kind of took off in terms of my Roundnet career. Like I started playing a lot more competitively, taking it more serious. Like back in high school, it was sort of just like a beach sport for me. But once I realized there was a whole tournament scene, then it was like, okay, like there's a lot of, and being the competitive person that I am, I wanted to play in these events and win these events. So it's it's fun to think about.
Yeah, I know I mentioned some lore, so I feel like it's a good time to get into it, at least briefly. That the 2018 East Regional Championship, this was back when Spikeball and their tour series, they had regional components where you could get bids through either points or auto bids at the regionals is how they had it structured versus today's day and age. We have just majors that are not geographic focused. Someone came on to this old Roundnet Facebook group and asked, like, who do we think is going to win this tournament? And you said something to the effect of, hey, it doesn't matter who we think's going to win. Like, all I care about is I think I should be playing in this top division with everybody. And what ensued was a 100+ comment thread with lots of people debating and just discussing who should just be able to show up and play at the top level. And we can talk a little more about that, especially as you progress as a player. But I'm just curious, like where some of your initial motivations for, you mentioned like you had your eyes opened and you're like, wow, this sport could really have more layers
Yeah.
to it and be more competitive. But where was that fire coming from when you mentioned like I want to take down the top dogs like today as a beginner? Maybe not a
Yeah.
beginner, but a newcomer.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. I think a lot of my sort of internal motivation was um, I've been playing basketball growing up. That was sort of my main sport, and I got to the point where I wasn't loving it as much anymore. Realized that I couldn't get to the college level at that sport, and I've always played a sport growing up at one point. So when I found Roundnet and I wanted to continue to get better at something, it was a big emphasis of mine to try to just play as many tournaments as I can, and play against the best, because I knew that the iron sharpens iron is true. So if I was even though I wasn't iron at the time, their iron would sharpen me, and I would get a lot better by competing against them. So I think my my motivation for writing up that whole comment chain was sort of the mindset of, I don't think the sport's big enough to have these types of divisions. I want to be able to play against the best, if I'm going to be spending like the money to do so. And I think my thoughts on it have kind of changed over time and developed as I've matured. But yeah, I want to see the sports grow, and yeah, I think maybe people could twist a little bit of what I said in the group, but I agree, it's definitely a bold hot take that grew
Cool.
a big
I
big
don't know if
spark.
there's much to twist as much as like there's lots of like opinions you can have about how like a sport should be built and structured, because it's still really young now, and that was 6 years ago. So do you think
Yeah.
6 years ago that like everything was figured out would be a wild take? But yeah, just like the kind of person it reminds me of, even like when people comment on like viral clips, like I could do that. Is like sometimes maybe don't even grasp like how complex some of the high level players are, and yet at the same time, like the high level players, there aren't that many that are really like pushing things forward. So I'm very curious, just like pivot from that like progression. You know, 3 years ago now, you became a like STS Premier player.
Mhm.
Like what that growth mindset has been, where you kind of like you came in saying I want to play with these players, not because you knew you were going to be better than them, but just because you knew what it add to you. And thinking about your practice like mentality now, what's kind of your motivation, and also like your goal when you think about not just where you are now, but also looking at where you want to be? Because that's I think the same motivation that came into why you wanted to play in the top division was, I want to be playing with these top players, even if I'm not ready. So yeah, how do you approach that, and how have you used like that North Star to get better?
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a lot of things that motivate me within the sport. When I first got Premiere, at the time, there were a lot of people that made highlight videos, and still to today, highlight videos are um, a growing part of the sport. Like, I don't think that they're made in a way which the outside, uh, viewer could understand really the sport, and it's sort of intentionally like that, at least from my perspective, because I just like to make things that I enjoy watching, not necessarily for the enjoyment of other people. So I have really enjoyed that aspect. And when I first got into the sport with making Premiere, um, I saw all these people like Coleman Epperson, David Gonzalez, Trippy Lizard. They were all making these highlight videos, and I really loved them, wanted to do it myself. And I knew that it'd be sweet to be able to compete and win these tournaments where I'd had videos, that were like it. So I think a lot of like the enjoyment from watching those, and wanting to be in them myself and make my own versions of them, was a big motivation at first, and I kind of still have that motivation. Like, I want to continue to kind of write like my own story in that way, and it's a way that I can look back on my journey and see all the different um, you know tournaments that I've played, and I try to make a video if I have a poor result or a win, and just kind of write the storybook that way. And it's fun. Like, I want to be able to not be athletic one day and have all these you know videos of me being athletic and remind me like what it was like. So Who knows how long, I really want to keep playing the sport. Like, I think that's another thing that I've started thinking more about. Um, but I do know that there's a lot left in the tank if I do want to continue to play. And yeah, I guess we'll see how like the rest of this year goes and where I'll be
Yeah,
at next
definitely.
year.
Well, I'm curious. Do you know point blank how many tournaments you've played to date?
Not like a
If
specific
you could
number.
ballpark.
I would guess around like 100, maybe a
Yeah.
little bit more than that. Like, I know that I'm at 88 highlight videos. So I
Okay.
know that
Yeah, that's a good starting
so
point.
yep. So I know that like I'm
For
around
you,
that,
not for
and
everybody.
I'm very excited for the 100th highlight video. That'll be fun. But yeah, I'm thinking I'm at like 88, and I probably have played tournaments. I know there were tournaments that I didn't make highlight videos for originally, and along the way, like sometimes I just, it's a rain tournament and I don't record, or whatever it is. So that there's reasons where like, I won't make a highlight video,
Mhm.
or if there's truly just not a lot of plays. But usually I can find, some plays to include to make a video. But um, yeah, there's probably around like 115 tourneys that I've played, if I had to guess. Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about. I haven't really reflected on it much. I feel like I've just been so like focused on the next tournament for so long. It's
Yeah.
yeah,
And I think being able to take time to do both those things is super valuable. Like you mentioned, like you have all these, like how many videos you put up, so you at least think about it a little bit. But the fact that so much of what you're doing, and at the same time, like competitively, you're just looking forward and you're looking at the next thing and growing towards it is, uh, I'm not in the mindset like coaching game. Like I'm not an expert there, but from what I've learned over time, like that all tracks. That you're like on to the next. Uh, you've already documented in journal. You're journaling live on YouTube basically in real time about how it's going. So it's
yeah,
very cool to see like you're just kind of capturing and sharing your experience. That's obviously again like one outlet, one expression that you found that you enjoy on top of the grind of playing. Separate from kind of like documenting and just sharing your
hmm
highlights over time. Like what else is going into right now? Like your approach to maybe how you're setting goals for yourself, how you're trying to progress. Obviously, like you and Pac got a really big win back in June. That was your first win together. You've added wins together since then as well. Like what other things are kind of on the roadmap for you when you think about what you have in the tank and what you're still pursuing as a player?
yeah, yeah. It's interesting because I think there like I guess when I like looked at my goals going into the year, the main thing for me was win a pitcher, and that was like my main goal because last year, my goal was to make the pro division with Justin, and we were able to achieve that. But we got second place at the Portland Open. So I wanted to get on a first place. I wanted to get a first place finish, and Hack and I got second a couple of times at the end of last year. So
Mhm.
going into this year, like we wanted to get a pitcher, and that was like our main goal. And then I was able to actually get one without Pack, even
Yeah.
though Pack and I like continued to get seconds, like even extending into 2024, like, and we wanted this pitcher at the beginning of the year. We still had like three more second places to start the year, so the goal didn't kind of hit. The goal didn't achieve itself right off the bat. We had to continue to grind and get to Richmond, but that's kind of a whole story in itself. I think the way I kind of see my goals formulating now are I want to win a championship, and that's sort of a big ticket that I didn't really think about going into the season. Like when I thought about Num as a team going into the year, I knew that we could compete with the best, um, but I needed to see it happen, and now kind of seeing it happen, it's making me think like, what else is there really left for us? Like we've won a challenger, we've won a major. At this point, it's like, there's USA Roundnet goals for myself individually, but for the team accomplishments in the sport, there's nothing really bigger than winning a championship. So
Yeah.
that's sort of where my goals have slotted towards now. But I think even bigger than that, like I just want to see myself peak in the sport with improving my weakest areas, and not necessarily thinking about it as like a results-based improvement. Like I know the results will come if I just focus on the right things, and that's where I'm really trying to point my energy towards is
Sure.
putting in like the inputs and figuring out like the biggest areas for improvement, and then just kind of going through the motions and hoping the results come from that and being happy with the inputs.
Yeah. I'm curious. You mentioned like being happy, like just with the work you're putting in. Like, I think that's like really like admirable because a lot of players maybe like over obsess on just the like the outcome goals instead of the process goals, and like only one team can win a tournament. So if that were the case, we'd have a lot of really sad people if everybody was oriented like that.
That's very true.
But I'm super curious. Like talking about this like growth and the progression. Doesn't really matter like how people want to like weigh it one way or another. Whether you want to say that you're like a top 5 player, 10 player, 20 player, like is not really relevant. I think like right now in Roundnet we have like a really interesting thing where there's just players that like you look at them and say, well, this player is competing very seriously and takes the sport very seriously. That's a top player is like how I think about it personally.
Yeah.
Leave the rankings to the mysterious people out in the world, but or the data. The data is also nice as we get more of that. But I'm curious, just like in you thinking about that, like, do you identify in that same way of like I'm of this like tier now where you've won these majors, you've made Team USA, which is a lot of exciting, but also like big work to do in a little bit. Like what? How do you perceive yourself right now as a player? Before I dig a little deeper
Yeah,
there.
yeah. I think the way I see myself is a player who can compete against anyone in the sport. I think the top player predicament is sort of something that's evolving. Like personally, I don't believe that there is a best player in the world. I think there can be a best player in the world any given tournament. Um, like Grant Clapwood proved last year at the championship,
Sure.
and like Gabe and Ryan have done so. Thomas have done so. Like there's been lots of players that have proven they can just take over a tournament. So I think just that whole debate is a little silly. I think it changes. Like one day it could be somebody, in the next tournament it's someone new. So I love it, of course, and I know we've talked on the side about like stats and wanting more data to sort of support claims like that. But I guess it's interesting. Like I don't really think about it too much myself. Just trying to go out there and play the best that I can with Pack or whoever else I'm playing with in Worlds when it comes. So very excited for that.
Yeah, super fair way to put it. And I think like on that note, I'm curious, as someone who feels like you compete with anyone on any given day, there's a lot of different predicaments when it comes to like not just who's the best, but also like, okay, all these players are really good. Like, what does it all mean? Like, what do you think of when you think of not just who you are on the court, but also in regards to like your role as a top player and what opportunities maybe that gives? Like, are there any things that you are doing that maybe you like? The Profit Pod is one example where you're talking about
Yeah.
your journey growing as a player. Is there anything else that you see for yourself as a top player that might be part of like the responsibility that you have to bear?
Yeah, I think I've been really fortunate to have like the success that I've had in the last year or so of playing the sport. And I've made a lot of friends along the way from traveling to all these tournaments. Something that I've noticed is the amount of people that have like reached out to me directly on social media and trying to connect with me about their own game. I've started thinking about like ways that I can get involved, like coaching. Like I made a post a while ago, sort of offering like video feedback and film review. So like that's still something I'm interested in doing with people, but I know that like in-person training is obviously the best way to do it. I think like that's an area in which I've gotten a lot of questions is like, hey, Kieran, can you send me a slow-mo of your cut serve? So I've talked to a lot of different people, probably a few dozen at this point, about their cut serve and sort of comparing it to mine, but understanding like their thought process with their swing. I think serving in general is a really fun subject because there's so many elements to it. So I think like maybe that's the area that a lot of people have asked me for advice. I think it's one of the biggest parts of our sport today in the way that it's played, but hopefully I can get people asking me for service tips by the end of the year.
Well, I'll note that I was trying to find that old post that they referenced with like all the comments about wanting to play in Premier Division. One other take I found from you that you'll probably love that you had this saying like defense is the most important skill because you play at half of the points, roughly, whereas you
Yeah.
only serve about a quarter of the time. And I can't remember what the rest of the discourse said, but as I was doing my homework for this, I just like thought you'd appreciate that hopefully you've made yourself proud becoming more complete as a player through the years instead of
Yeah,
just
yeah. Yeah, like I still to an extent believe that. I think, serving and serve receiver are the two biggest things, but um, you know, defense is the other way that you can get breaks. So being able to play that at a high level, like I think it's fun thinking about, and this is a little like off topic, but it's fun thinking about the sport as like a peak sport and a watchable sport that is getting funding from a lot of major organizations. And my head, at least how I sort of expect the sport to be one day, is a lot more rallies, of course. And it's funny, you look at like our sport, there are not like a ton of insane athletes at the top of our sport. Not that there couldn't be, but it's interesting. Like I myself don't consider myself like an insane athlete. I think you look
I'm a
at
former top 40 player. Like I know, I
yeah.
agree.
So it's like it's interesting because if this sport had major payouts, like if you had said, there's a tournament next year that's paying out millions of dollars, you'd have people all over the globe that are insane athletes grinding the sport, getting. I think we need to get to a point where the rules are changed to support rallies and to get to that point. But it is just kind of crazy. Like I think looking into the future, that would be the top players are the people that are the most athletic, the best at defense. That's what the sport is. When you really boil it down, it's just the way that the equipment and the rules are run today are very friendly to servers and serve receivers, which unfortunately there's a lot less serve receivers.
The other like thing that I always think about is like who stays around to play around are the people that are enjoying how it looks right now, and so the voices that are wanting this balance, they don't stick around as long as people that are really loving the serve interaction, which is like a really cool thing. Also, like I think. Like I can say for myself at least, like I really enjoy both those elements, the serve receive as well as like the defensive element of the sport. And I'm not saying I'm the only one, but just that a lot of people who stop playing usually say there's not enough rallies. And so if the people that are leaving the sport say there's not enough rallies, that means we are losing the people who are advocating for that kind of change. So other people might learn that as we go, which I think is happening. But that's just a funny and really like sad trend of like what we clearly need. We've had the signals about for a while. And like you mentioned, like the we have an idea, like we all have a picture in our head of what we want Roundnet to look like in a perfect world where there's all this money coming in, all of this support, all of these players. But yeah, like getting there like one step at a time is like really just grueling.
It's interesting to think about. Like I think it's just going to take a lot of different steps from all of us. You were mentioning sort of like my role as a top player. I think you've spoken about it before, but growing your community is one of the biggest things you can do. And I'm very excited. I just moved to New York City. Obviously, not living there right now just because I'm on this 3-week trip, but I'm gonna have a new community to kind of work and play with in the future, and at least there for another year. So I'm very excited for that to, I guess, like play with a lot of the premier and contender players that live in New York City. There's a few pro players. Max, who's hurt right now, and Dan Abrams is moving there, so I'm excited to play with them, but also excited to grow the community and just expand like what New York City can be. Look at it like it's a hub of the biggest city in the U.S.
It should be the biggest Roundnet community.
It should be the biggest. It should be the biggest Roundnet community. It should have the most top players. Like
it should have the most like funding locally. Like you guys should have a lot of. I could go on for me personally. Thinking about how like I want to improve the DC community, and having like the top players bought in on the local community so the local community can support the top players, and that kind of going round and round. And I think, yeah, you guys have a lot of pieces in New York to get things rolling in a good way.
Yeah, it'll be exciting.
Yeah, definitely. So talked a bit about like some of the coaching, almost the community development as a top player, and we also talked a little bit about like how like this rules side of things, like trying to advocate and just be a voice for like the sport being better and pushing it forward. Those are all things you see as like a top player. I'm also curious on like the flip side of the coin. Kind of the last thing I wanted to like zone in on today was
Sure.
like by most measures, you are like the travelingest Roundnet player in the world right now, and like it's no secret you have like a couple of sponsors that like support you as a Roundnet player. We got like Premier Spikes, Slunks have been supporting like Numb. I would say your number one sponsor, it's how I identified at least myself, is like your number one sponsor is FanDuel, which is your employer. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that.
Yeah. No, that's fine.
But it's
Yeah.
like you work at FanDuel, you do a good job at FanDuel, great employee, and then on the weekends you take your salary and you say, I'm going to put this much towards my Roundnet expenses. And I just would love to hear from you on how you think about, like we mentioned, like we don't make millions of dollars, but also we're not the best athletes yet. Of being a top player and like what those real costs are, money, time,
Mhm.
and just like for you, again, you mentioned you have these goals you're still striving towards. So so long as you have that motivation, I guess the costs are worth it. But I just wanted to get real, if you're wanting to just talk about
Sure.
what that cost looks like for you. And again, you're the travelingest player in the US at least. Like what you see when, you don't really have a peer right now for someone who is traveling as much as you are.
Yeah, I've looked at the Fuego recently, and I saw that I have like 28 tournaments played or something like that, and the next closest is like 16 or 17. So it's definitely, I realize that I've played more than anyone. But yeah, I guess it's just kind of diving into those points. You're right; it's pretty expensive lifestyle. I think I'm just sort of lucky that I have a job in which I, have a flexible hybrid schedule and um, can afford to play in the tournaments that I get to. Um, I think something that's kind of interesting is like you said, no one else really travels and plays as much as me. Um, I knew that no one was really doing that when I kind of committed to it last year. Like I think last year was the first year in which I like fully committed to Roundnet and decided I wanted to play like as many tournaments as I could. So last year with Justin, it was sort of like our season goal was playing as many turns as we can, give ourselves 3 good results that can get us into the pro division. We got into the pro division, great. And then this year, my goals kind of shifted towards like becoming the best player that I can be, continuing to develop, playing with Pac, who, um, has been a great player and developing in his own right. So it's fun to think about. I hope that more people can play tournaments as much as I can. Like I think I love to think about the future of the sport having like 40 to 50, even hundreds of players able to compete in all of the same tournaments. And I think that's the biggest way that you can see, I guess, just the success of players against each other. Like I think while I'm very lucky to have the success that I've had this year, a lot of that is due to just that I've been able to play so many tournaments and I've been able to improve really quickly. Would love to see like how some of the other top players would be playing today if they could play as many tournaments that I have. So I think there's two sides of the coin there as well. And yeah, I just yeah, you're always going to experience. I think that's the other thing. Sorry, there's like a dog next to me here, but you're always going to experience like a new high and a new low with traveling and playing all these tournaments. And I think just enjoying the journey, like I have so far, has been great. And I mean, yeah, that's one of the biggest things you can do in terms of self improvement in anything is just put all your time and effort into it. Work on the inputs and not worry about the results. So yeah, there's been a lot of times where I've left the tournament feeling really down about the sport. And then a lot of tournaments where, especially Richmond, where it felt super rewarding. So yeah, it just takes time, and I've really enjoyed playing all the tournaments that I have. I kind of plan to continue to do that. So like I said, we'll see how many more years I do it, but I've liked playing as many.
Yeah, I start to think about like longevity and like burnout as a player. Like, if you travel 30 weekends a year, are you more likely to burn out faster or slower, depending on you kind of, like you said, you've committed and you've kind of given yourself no option but to do this. How do you weigh in like what is limited time, limited resources for you? Like, you kind of have your calculation, right? Like, no one can fault you for making your choices, but more so, you mentioned like you are on one end of the spectrum where you are playing and traveling so much, putting to the side all the things that are great about life separate from Roundnet, but just the Roundnet side of things. We mentioned like this really cool opportunity I have now in New York to be part of that community. Just trying to juxtapose like the energy, if you want to even like think prognosticating into next year, how much you might try to focus on that community so that you don't need to travel every single weekend to challenge yourself, and what maybe that balance might look like. If you've thought about it, or if you have an idea of
Yeah,
where you want to go with it.
it's a no, it's a great thought. Like I think continuing to grow the New York City community will be a big piece of that. Like I've already started to see like a lot of potential in some of the people that I've played pickups with. So it's exciting. I think going into next year, like I think I'll play less tournaments than I did these last 2 years. I think a lot of that has to do with sort of like my goals with the sport. Like now winning a major, like I sort of focused on the championship now. So um, like a lot of the other pro players that have kind of gotten to that point where they've made pro, but they haven't won a championship, I think um, we all sort of share that goal and want to get there. So uh, hoping Pack and I win the championship this year, and then I'll be thinking about different goals into next year. But
Sure.
yeah, I guess we'll kind of have to see how the rest of this year goes, and then see from there like where it ends up.
Fair enough. Well, is there anything else that you want to share just about maybe how things are going or where you see things going?
As in
Like
as in what?
how the journey's been going this year for Roundnet, like as a player
Yeah,
and
yeah.
balancing things, or yeah, I feel like you summed it up pretty well otherwise.
No. That's a good question. I think it's going great. I have tried to focus on a lot of things outside of the sport that can help me with Roundup, but also my life. So reading more than I ever have. I think that's helped me a lot with Roundnet and just in terms of my focus. Like I think being able to sit down and read for like 30 minutes is one way that I kind of see it translate to Roundnet, in which I feel very focused when I'm playing, and that also is true with meditation. So like practicing those two things. Ever since I like kind of started taking this sport more seriously, I've put a big emphasis on like eating healthy. So um, when I've kind of been living in my own life, like even if I can't do it all the time, I try to um, you know eat healthy, have portion control, um, try to treat the sport like a professional athlete where I can, and that kind of leads to a lot of different things. But yeah, I just try to find ways in which I can elevate my life that helps my Roundnet life and my personal life, both. So
Yeah, yeah, I
yeah,
love that. That's a great like just truism across, I think, all sports. Obviously, the Olympics are going on right now, and that like all comes to mind. Like, it's just being like the best you on the court, off the court. So I appreciate that. Um, if you haven't watched a Kieran Rose highlight video, like, just can you quickly remind people like where can people find you and just keep up with the grind,
yeah,
the highlights, everything?
yeah. People can find me Kieran Rose Roundnet on YouTube, and Kieran, or I guess it's Kieran Roundnet, Kieran_Roundnet on Instagram. So kind of my two main avenues for content. I want to do sort of like some new stuff with my content. I've done a lot of the same for a while now, intentionally. But there is sort of some more stuff I want to do, so I'll leave that as a secret for now. But this highlight video in Seattle from this past weekend is going to be really good. So look out for that one.
Yeah, I did see some fun clips this weekend. Well, if you have any suggestions on what those secret things should be, just comment them below, and all the links will be to follow Kieran in this description of the video. But really good chatting with you. I appreciate you sharing a bit of this story that you've been on. A couple really cool notes also about how you've like thought about the goal setting, and also just how you're using Rounded as like this thing that you enjoy, but also like to make your whole life better. I definitely can relate to that in a lot of ways, and it was a good reminder to keep doing that kind of stuff. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks again for having me on, Ben. It's been fun, and see you soon at I guess, will you be at Salt Lake or?
Gonna make me get this up before the weekend, but yeah, I'll see you in Salt Lake City.
Okay, sweet. See you then.
Love that editing pressure. Sick.
Nice.